Disney's up today, and it ain't because of subscribers. We'll have the 411 for you right now.
Fantastic.
It's almost like that background on my screen, Pete. There's probably about 50 people in the airplane lounge right now, airline lounge. And so not quite as crowded as that, but closing in on it.
I think it's given people a great opportunity to see just how much you truly travel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm jumping on a plane in an hour, taking the jet over to Dominican Republic, Pete. No. Casa de Campo.
Oh, that'll be pretty cool. That's a beautiful area. I know that. I haven't been there, and actually, I have never been there, but I have friends from there who are married to people from there, so they always give me great pictures and everything else. But man, those are beautiful beaches and stuff. So I'm a little jealous as the weekend approaches.
Yeah, approaches. Tutlings. Your king approaches. I still remember Norris pulling that one.
That was great. That was great.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. I'm John Najarian. He is Pete Najarian, and we're going to be covering stocks today, macro as well as fantastic futures. So what do you say we dive in, Pete?
Let's do it.
I'm going to start off with the macro being that if everything's so great, that we had 8 straight days of basically the Dow and S&P trading to the upside, Pete. That was broken yesterday by one of those two. But if everything's so great, why isn't anybody coming IPO? Because bad companies can't go public and good companies don't want to go public right now because the market's not good for them. So that's what I'd say is the macro, even though there's individual stocks that we'll cover that are doing really well.
There are definitely individual stocks. I would agree with you, John. Matter of fact, I'd throw this out to you. 3 of the 4 biggest IPOs this past year so far are in negative territory. That might be scaring people off, I would say, on the IPO market. And there's only one and it's not even in positive territory, John. It's just flat. So when you think about that, and that's ARM Holding, but it's Birkenstock, Instacart, and Kenvue, all are in the negative. So I think those that are looking to IPO, they're thinking, well, you know what? Maybe we'll push this back a little bit. Maybe we'll do it in 2024. Maybe things will change.
Yeah, I think you're right. Pete. Well, let's take a look at fantastic futures, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. We always love fantastic futures. I'm going to say, Pete, it's Bitcoin because the Bitcoin futures traded up over 36,600, I think, on the highs. And right now, still over 30. I'm sorry, I said 36. I think I said it's 37,600. Wow. Up 33% in 30 days. That's pretty nice performance.
That's incredible performance. I got one for you that's taken a lot longer, but the performance is still right there. How about this? I'm going to give you for a fantastic future. How about sugar? Now, you talked about this quite a while ago, and I'm going to revisit this because all it does is go up a little bit higher every single week. And it's been on an incredible run to the upside. It's up 55% for the year, John, year to date. It's a heck of a run. And you know what? It's like any commodity. It's a lot like oil for that, from the perspective of, hey, the demand, that's there. Is there enough supply? And that's what we're dealing with here. And that's the reason we're seeing this particular commodity make one heck of a move from the bottom left to the upper right. And it's been happening the entire year. I think we started off at 19. Here we are now pushing at 28. That's a pretty nice run.
That is. And sugar is a big part of the economy because so many people use it in products you don't even suspect, folks. All right, let's talk about Disney, Pete. Yeah. And I've been very critical of Iger, and I'm going to be critical of him again today. I was critical of him from, the 160s all the way down to 80, Pete, when you and I finally said, okay, it's probably done going down. Doesn't mean it's going up, but probably done going down. Made it to about 84 yesterday. and then boom, pops to the upside today. Why did it pop? Well, let me see. Cost cutting. Does that make him real creative, Pete? Because I remember a guy named Chainsaw Al Dunlop that's all that guy used to do, or Carl Icahn. They'd go in there and strip companies bare. And then, of course, you drop more revenue to the bottom line then because you didn't have as many expenses. Well, they haven't come up with anything new. This Marvel's plural movie is only drawing a 55 on Rotten Tomatoes. They're coming up with Black Snow White and all these other things. Again, you can go woke. You might go broke because you're alienating half the country when you do that. And this guy's big creative thing was he was going to cut $2 billion. Now he's cut another $2 billion as far as cost cutting at Disney. That's how creative he is, Pete.
Yeah, it's all you've got to say, you said it all. Actually, this particular report looks good though. When you're looking at it, you look at the earnings, that looks pretty good. You look at the revenue, that's got some growth. So from the standpoint of this particular quarter, but let's also go back, and this stock, John, is basically hanging very closely. Nice move in the last couple of days, so it's off of that a little bit, but very close to 9-year lows. Let that sink in for a second. So I totally agree with you. I think they are making some moves. I don't know how creative I'd give them too many credits on that, but I would say this. I would say they're at least understanding the consumer to some degree, and they've got, your ESPN Plus, you've got Disney Plus, you've got these things. And the one thing, my takeaway from all that though was this, not that they're creative, but we're noticing that 50% of the signups, John, are folks that are willing to have all the ads included so they wouldn't have to pay as much. It's kind of interesting when you look at it from that perspective. It tells you a little bit more about the economy. It tells you a little bit more about where people are willing to spend money and where they're not. And I think that's an interesting takeaway from what we got from Disney.
I agree. And, I'll be surprised if it doesn't retrace some here, Pete, because again, just cost cutting alone, and everybody thinks they're going to spin out ESPN and all that. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But again, this is not a terribly creative group. It's a group that wants to wave the woke flag, and that can get you in big trouble. Look at what happened to Target and Budweiser, a host of other companies. All right, let's talk about Affirm, because they are affirmed that what Pete said about the economy, maybe we're not doing so great. Because what is this, Pete? A buy now, pay later company. So in other words, I want that, but I can't afford it. And my choices are put it on a credit card or pay later. We used to call that layaway. That's what these guys are, basically a high-tech layaway. Well, they did report great numbers, but I think they reported them, Pete, because people are not feeling as flush, and they're saying, fine, I want that coat, I'm going to buy that coat. I want that flat screen TV, I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to put it on a buy now, pay later like Affirm. And that's another sign that you guys should be paying attention to.
Revenue was up big though. Revenue, I think year over year is up 47% or something like that, John. So they to your point. Now, I'm not saying it's great or not, but revenue can be a tricky way to actually look at things, to be honest with you, because you and I like to see profits. Revenue is great, but we'd like to see the profits on top of that revenue. Well, they did hit a 52-week high today, and part of that probably due to the fact that this is a company, like we talk about a lot, when you do have any kind of positive news, and the positive news was the revenue was up so strong. Well, people start scrambling a little bit. Next thing you know, you've got yourself a huge volume day and a big short squeeze. It's exactly what we're seeing happening here today. 52-week highs being hit. We'll see if that's sustainable, but it certainly is something pretty interesting, John. Their interest income was up 92%. So they've got some numbers that they managed to put these up. I think we'll have to revisit this in the next 6 months to find out, all right, well, are they paying later? Well, yeah. We'll find out if they actually execute on that side of it.
Yeah, that would be the delinquencies, folks. And Pete and I will cover that in the coming months. All right, Pete, what about RAMP, R-A-M-P? Stock truly did ramp lower left to upper right. They basically have a collaboration platform that allows organizations to unify the customers in one spot. And apparently subscription revenue was up about 5% year over year. That's good number. It was $126 million, which is also pretty darn good. And their margins are very strong. So that's why Ramp, basically did all three things right. Beat top line, bottom line, and guided higher.
100% right there with you, John. Stocks up at 52-week highs. This is another one. Great example. Obviously, consumer privacy protection is something I think we all strive for. We all want a little bit more of that. But to your point, you crush it on earnings, you crush it on your revenue. But then all of a sudden it comes the guidance. Well, they crushed it on the guidance. So when you get the trifecta, that's not so bad. And inside of that guidance, I can tell you, the margins are what really stood out for me. They were talking about the operating margins. That's a pretty strong spot for them as well. So hats off to them. This is a great report, and it's why the stock's at these 52-week highs. And when we say that, John, what I still think is funny, though, is everybody still wants to say there's only 7 stocks. That is not true. There are other stocks out there. I'll throw out a DR Horton for you as one of them. I mean, we were talking about that before earlier today, and that's one of these stocks that's just been ripping to the upside. There are some other stocks out there other than just NVIDIA and some of the others, but nobody else ever wants to talk about that.
No, why would you? All right, let's hit one, Pete, that's near and dear to your heart and mine, because when we've done some of the Rebels in what was that in Jacksonville, Pete, that golf outing we did, we took all the customers out to a Top Golf because it's extremely popular. People love going out there. The balls just keep coming, hit as many as you want. It's fun. You're just, knocking that little ball as hard as you can. And the people that are really serious about golf are working on their swings, but that ain't us. So shares are down sharply today. Basically, they slashed their guidance, which is never a good thing. And I was kind of surprised about that, Pete, but this is a merger between Callaway, the golf club company, and balls, as well as Top Golf, those platforms where you've got the double decker and the bars and everybody's enjoying themselves. So maybe that's one of the reasons they had to slash the guidance, Pete. Maybe people aren't buying as many clubs.
Yeah, I think that is part of it. I would guess that that's part of it. I mean, there are certain experiences people pay up for, and right now it's in travel primarily, John. But they're willing to do that, but they're not willing to do it on things like couches, like golf clubs, like all those kinds of things. They've moved away from that, more of the durable side. So I think when you look at the numbers that they put up, and specifically, like, as you said, their guidance, I look at that and I go, well, I don't even have to look at the stock. I can tell you, I think this thing's probably down, 10, 12%. You take a look, 17%. So the stock getting absolutely clocked. They also have a free cash flow that is not a flow, it's a burn, and they're burning about 500 million, John. So that's another thing that I think has to happen. They've got huge amounts of debt. This is one of those that we talked about, a couple of 52-week highs. This is one that's actually hitting 52-week lows today, and that's never a good thing, but the stock is getting hammered for sure.
Well, what have you got in the red zone today, Pete, for your sports?
All right, I'm going to give you one. We don't talk as much about basketball because it hasn't really been around. Obviously, we got a great team in the Denver Nuggets who continue to be a great team. But I just wanted to point it out because it was pointed out to me by a lot of my friends recently. I'm back up in Minnesota. If you can't tell, I got a little bit of thicker clothes on. But John, the Minnesota Timberwolves might actually be a team that might be somebody to be reckoned with this year. And I'll tell you why. So it's early. We all know that. And you always make crazy calls early. But you look at Anthony Edwards and you look at Rudy Gobert and you look at Big Cat and you start looking at a team that's finally come together. It took them a little while. It took them a year. But this is a team that so far this year, they played the Denver Nuggets, right? When they had that opportunity, they beat them. I mean, you look at the Nuggets, they are an 8-1 basketball team this year with one loss, and it's here in Minnesota, where Minnesota continues to be undefeated. They just slaughtered the Pelicans last night. And so it's kind of fun. Now, this is a team that's never gone very far. They've been in the playoffs, but they've never gone very far. They've been a franchise for what? The better part, John, am I right if I say maybe 25 years or something like that? Probably, I would say something close to that anyway. And it's interesting though, because I think the fan base is finally extremely excited because of the players they have. I mean, we're talking about three guys specifically, the ones I just named, that probably are somewhere in the top, I don't know, 30 players in the NBA. And you've got 2 7-footers, one of them a defensive guy, one of them an offensive guy, and you put that together with Anthony Edwards, who I think is a little bit of a, now, I'm not saying he's Michael Jordan, but he's got a little Michael Jordan in him and a little bit of Kobe Bryant, and it makes him a competitor. By the way, he doesn't do the load management. He followed in the footsteps of those other two, which makes you love him even more. And he's been vocal about it, John. He's been at press conferences talking about load management and what a crock of crap that is for the fans. So, I think the Minnesota people have embraced him. They've embraced the team. And it's kind of fun early on to see somebody like the Timberwolves playing so well. Have you been paying attention at all at the NBA? I mean, Boston's still good. They're going to be good and all the rest. But how about you? What do you think?
I'd say, Pete, that your Timberwolves are definitely a good team that could go not just into the playoffs, but fairly deep. There's some luck involved in getting deep, and even into the finals. Unless you're the Nuggets, and then it's, just got to play your game and you're in. But I would say Mark Cuban's team, Pete, the Dallas Mavericks, I like that team a lot. I think they're 6-2 versus the Nuggets at 8-1. I thought the Celtics looked good last year. They haven't looked like world beaters this year, but I'm sure they're still good. Milwaukee Bucks, because you've got just a hugely talented all-star and MVP on that team, the big Greek kid. I'd love to see your Timberwolves do well, Pete, because nobody else is picking them to do that. But I'd say Cuban with his Dallas Mavericks would be one of the picks that I'd go with right here, followed by the Milwaukee Bucks.
I think those are good. I'd throw in Boston. I know you talked about Boston, but I'd chuck them in for sure. They just have so much talent. It's hard to look past that. All right. How about a little college football, John? I like doing this, kind of fun, because we're going to give you a little bit of a glimpse at what games are the biggest games we think going into the weekend. Michigan and Penn State. Michigan's number 3, Penn State's number 10 in the country, right? They're both great teams, but the problem that you run into is Michigan really hasn't had to play anybody until now. Then they get Penn State, then they get Ohio State. That starts to give them the resume that everybody keeps talking about. They also have a coach who's got a little bit of an issue. and until that's resolved, that's going to be hanging around for a while. So it's a great football team. Penn State is a very, very good team. I think that's going to be a fun game, John. Are you looking forward to that one to kick it off? It's like 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday.
I had to mute it here just because a few minutes ago, Pete, they came by and said, could you keep it down? And I'm thinking, you guys are the loud ones, not me. But anyway, first thing, Pete, Michigan 24 straight wins regular season. That's damned impressive. You're looking at Georgia and you're saying, well, Georgia's in the same boat, but of course they have 2 national titles as part of that. But nonetheless, this Michigan team is great. I also thought it was interesting, Pete, what I sent you about, that people were complaining about something that isn't even illegal, which is the, alleged scouting other teams and getting their signals. The guy's sitting there with his cell phone. He ain't sitting there with, some 300 millimeter telescopic lens that he's picking up these things. He's just sitting there and then sharing apparently with the team. I'd point out, Pete, that last year people were sharing Michigan signals with Ohio State in hopes of Ohio State upending Michigan. And Rutgers was also doing some, nefarious stuff. So there are some teams absolutely doing what teams shouldn't do. And yet they're all going to focus on Michigan just because Michigan is going to roll everyone in the Big Ten. You heard it here, but they are going to roll everybody in the Big Ten, including Penn State this weekend and including Ohio State in the both matchups, Pete, because they'll get to play them a couple times.
It should be fun. I like
That's my prediction.
Yeah, I like the Michigan team too, John. I think they're pretty outstanding. But you know, the competition levels that they've played, they've beaten the tar out of a lot of teams this year, and so that's impressive, I think, on top of everything else. We got Utah, they're number 18, playing Washington at Washington. I think it should be fun, but I think unfortunately for Utah, they just don't have the firepower. You and I have talked about the quarterback Penix. He's been unbelievable. He's a Heisman candidate, one of the call him front runner, and he's been pretty impressive for the entire year. That offense is incredible for Washington. The only issue they might have is on the defensive side, because the offensive side is really something special. Then you got Tennessee and Missouri. That should be a lot of fun, because somebody is going to walk away with 3 losses, and that's not going to be fun for them, but the other one's going to still be in the hunt, so to speak. And then Ole Miss is playing Georgia at Georgia. I think that's the game to focus on, John, because as good as Georgia is, they just don't look like the dominating Georgia that they have been. Now, they've won every game. They've put up some good points, but they've given up some good points too. Even though the defense is highly rated, they've given up some points in some games that normally Georgia doesn't do. So I think that game, and it could be kind of fun because both coaches are interesting. Both coaches are pretty aggressive. And it's the SEC. I mean, this is when football gets fun.
Yeah, I like that Ole Miss Georgia game, Pete. If it's an oblong ball, so it bounces funny sometimes. You know, on any given punt, it could bounce and fly back into a kid's legs, and all of a sudden it's a 14-point swing in a game. You know, like that. You see just quick scoring out of either of those two teams if they get an advantage like that. Like I say, a hot ball hitting or a fumble or a pass that gets deflected at the line of scrimmage, and so it goes up in the air. Mississippi's got a shot. Ole Miss has got a shot. But I got to say, and I think you agree, that Georgia should win here. And as far as Penix, all he did last week, Pete, was put 2 halves of the greatest offensive display that we've seen in years together against USC. Yeah. And meanwhile, his defense actually came to life in the second half because, you know, he's playing against the Heisman Award winner last year. And that guy was, you know, throw for throw with him in the first half. And then what happened in the second half, right? What happened to Caleb Williams? He kind of disappeared. And that was because Washington finally figured out how to stop at least some of the things that Ohio State was doing, and that shut them down. Yeah. So, you know, I thought that was a great game. That will be his highlight reel for the Heisman, Pete. When you come and you score 14 in the second half they ended up with, I think, 52 or 54 to 42, Pete. And it was 42-42 in the first. There wasn't a lick of defense played by either team in the first half of that game. But that's exciting football, and everybody but the USC fans loved it.
Yeah. Pac-12's still been a fun year. It's been a great year. And I still have Bo Nix in front of Penix right now, but you know, that could change. And they've played against each other once in a great game that went all the way down to the wire. So who knows? Maybe there's still a shot somewhere for Bo Nix to show that he could be a Heisman guy too. It'll be pretty fun to watch.
It will be. Well, as you folks know, we do not have a Rebels Edge tomorrow because of our travel schedule. And I will be traveling back to Puerto Rico tomorrow from the Dominican Republic, where I'm speaking at a wealth conference there with a lot of hitters. So that should be fun, Pete. But for all of you, please tell a friend about the Rebels Edge. Have them join you on Monday, because we'll be back Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you.